Paul, we are ready to go.
Ready to go? All right. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us for our 18th World Elder Abuse Awareness Day event, Rights First, Preventing Elder Abuse in a Changing Aged Care Landscape. Very important topic. My name is Paul Brown, and I'll be your MC for today. I've been with ARIS since 2023, and I'm currently Deputy Chair of the ARIS Board. Thank you to the 550 people that have joined us today. It's encouraging that we've got so many people that have come on board. It's encouraging that you're interested in helping address this very real and very serious issue. Thank you also to our generous panelists. We've got an amazing lineup of speakers. They've taken time off from their busy schedules to be part of this forum. We're going to start with an acknowledgement, and to do that, we're very privileged to have our board member, Alex Huthhausen. He's a proud Aboriginal man from a Yamatji Nation of the Pilbara region in WA. He joined the ARIS board in 2021 and is a member of the ARIS Reconciliation Action Plan. So thank you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. As Paul mentioned, my name is Alex Huthhausen. So, Banti Mongol Gurda Jija. So, good morning, brothers and sisters. So, yes, Paul, I am a Yamatji Barangara man from Central Western Desert of WA, and thank you for allowing me to do the acknowledgement of country. Today we meet in Puckapuckanthi, one of the traditional hunting grounds, camping and ceremonial grounds of the Kaurna people. I'd just like you to take a deep breath and close your eyes for a moment as you may imagine the sounds of people singing and dancing on the earth, or sense the smell of smoke from ceremonies held in this place long ago. Kaurna people are the custodians of this land on which we meet today. Our elders, who are the holders of history, the storytellers, the lawmakers, who have walked before me, and our future leaders who will walk beyond me. We recognise and respect the cultural heritage, spiritual beliefs and relationship to the land. It is the place of Kāri, the emu, and Tanda, the red kangaroo, whose story travels from the coast inland. I extend respect to fellow First Nations brothers and sisters from other language groups who walk together in partnership on this journey and acknowledge the presence of ancestors who believe everything on country is connected. The people, the land, the sea and its animals and plants. Language is power, and sometimes we must harness the power for ourselves. It's vital we do this in ways which strengthen our identity and make us feel proud of who we are and where we're going and what we can achieve. First Nations people have knowledge of the Dreamtime and the stories explaining how the earth and its animals were created. This connection to the land is both spiritual and physical. As we listen to the people of the land and feel the presence of those ancestors who reside in the imagination of this land and whose irrepressible spirit flows through all creation. Now, Wangani Mani Nabudni, I say welcome, it's good you came. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex, so much. It's so great to have Alex on our board to bring that perspective. So thank you so much for that introduction and the welcome. Before we get into the presentations, I just want to go through a few housekeeping topics. Today's forum is being recorded, and we'll share the link with you once the event has concluded. You're welcome to revisit the content and share it with your colleagues or broader network, and I'd be pleased if you do that. As it is a webinar, your microphones are muted and the cameras are off. If you have any general comments, experience any technical issues, please use the chat box, and a member of our team, I've got Isabel sitting just across the road from me, they'll be able to assist you. We encourage your questions throughout the session. Please use the Q&A box to submit any questions for our speakers. We do have a number lined up already. If possible, include the name of the speaker your question is directed to. I'll raise the questions during our Q&A session at the end of the presentations, given that we may have time to do that. Well, we'll do our best to address as many questions as possible today. If we're unable to get to yours, please feel free to contact Aris directly after the session. We value your feedback, and a short survey will be emailed to you after the webinar. We'd appreciate you taking a few moments to let us know your thoughts. Okay, so let's get underway. We're going to put up a couple of polls in a few seconds. So Sakina, can you put the first one up? The question in option 1, which type of elder abuse are you most concerned about in your community? If you just want to go through and tick that off. Couple more seconds, then we'll close the poll. Thanks, Sakina. Can you share the results now for us, please?
Those are the results on the screen, Paul. Thank you.
Okay, interesting. Emotional and psychological abuse ranks highest alongside financial abuse, but a pretty even spread across all of those questions. Okay, can we put up the second poll, please? The question is, how confident do you feel in identifying signs of abuse of an older person?
I've shared the results, Paul.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Sakina. Somewhat confident is the outstanding result there. Not many very confident, and a few that are not confident at all. It's a pretty hard thing to identify, to be fair. Option 3, do you know where to report suspected elder abuse in your state or territory? Thanks, Keith. Put that up.
I've shared the results, Paul.
Okay, thank you. Outstanding is yes, I know the correct reporting service. That gives me heart that people know to do that and have a general idea. So really quite a positive response. Thank you for participating. You should find a list of elder abuse helplines in each state and territory, along with the national abuse helpline, which Sakina's just put out. Thank you. This year's theme of our online forum is Rights First, Preventing Elder Abuse in a Changing Aged Care Landscape, and it is changing almost weekly. It places the rights of older people at the centre of aged care reform. As we navigate ongoing changes in policy and practice, it is more important than ever to ensure that prevention of elder abuse remains a priority. To understand why this remains such a critical issue, it is important that we're clear about what elder abuse actually is. Elder abuse is defined as a single or repeated act or lack of appropriate action that causes harm or distress to an older person, particularly within a relationship of trust. It can take many forms, including physical, sexual, psychological, financial, and also neglect. Today's forum is an opportunity to explore these issues, share knowledge, and reaffirm our collective commitment to protecting the rights, dignity, and well-being of our older people. These are treasured people within our community. They spent their life working, paying taxes, and they deserve to be looked after. Every year we invite organisations and community groups to stand up and speak out and mark World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. We encourage your organisation, workplace or social group to get involved, whether that's by hosting a morning tea, holding an information session or simply wearing something purple to show your support. Every action, no matter how small, helps raise awareness and spark important conversations about the rights and well-being of older people. Before we get started, I need to give the following disclaimer that any material or views expressed today are the views of the presenters and not the views of ARIS. The material presented is also of a general nature and you should seek professional advice for your individual circumstances. I'd now like to play a welcoming message from Honourable Nat Cook, Member of Parliament, Minister for Human Services and Minister for Seniors and Ageing Well in the South Australian Government.
Namani, no nari nat katenya, mani nadlu tampinti, nadlu gana yatanga imparinti. Wherever we are across the land, we are on Aboriginal land, and we walk together with elders past and present, listening to their stories and journeying with them and emerging leaders as well in the Aboriginal community. Apologies I couldn't attend in person today, but I thank ARIS for inviting me to open today's 18th annual World Elder Abuse Awareness Day online forum. I'm deeply committed to improving the lives of our community and in particular the ageing community and the many members of the community who are marginalised for whatever reason. Of course, many of you in this room would recall the parliamentary inquiry into elder abuse I led with Kelly Vincent. This was launched following the emergence of the terrible footage of the late Clary Hosler being assaulted by a worker in his nursing home bed. The ensuing report reflected on a huge increase in elder abuse and also made a number of significant recommendations, with ensuing work we continue to build on today. These included the establishment of the Adult Safeguarding Unit with investigative powers and better coordination between state and federal governments to address the issue. We emphasised the unique vulnerabilities of older women, in particular those with intersecting challenges of disability, cultural, gender or sexually diverse or socioeconomic challenges. The breach of trust manifesting in the various forms of financial, psychological, emotional and physical abuse toward older people is horrific to consider, making it even more essential to commit to change. This brings me to the theme for today's forum. Rights First, preventing elder abuse in a changing aged care landscape, placing older people's rights as a focus and highlights the importance of preventative actions. As Minister for Seniors and Ageing Well and Minister for Human Services, I'm proud that our government takes a whole-of-life approach to the wellbeing of South Australians. We've seen this through the establishment of Preventive Health SA to the focus on safeguarding rights in the Department of Human Services and the Office for Ageing Well. As part of World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, I'll reflect on the work of the Office for Ageing Well to prevent, react and embed the rights of older South Australians. Through the future directions to safeguard the rights of older Australians 23 to 27, we've recognised and outlined the principles, priorities and conditions to help eliminate elder abuse and mistreatment of older South Australians. What is clear is the need for a coordinated partnership with an understanding of individual, community and system approaches to address the issue. Our Adult Safeguarding Unit has taken on that role, listening to the needs of individuals, engaging in upskilling the community to safeguard and reforming knowledge and approaches in the system. And work of the Office for Ageing Well embeds this through partnerships with organisations like ARIS to engage and support older people to understand their rights, including in retirement villages. The Ageing Well grants, providing funding for projects like Grandfriends, an intergenerational program, and Our Elders Speak, supporting the digital recording of elders' stories in language. And the Tackling Ageism campaign, an all-in public communication to call out elder abuse for what it is and do something about it. In a changing landscape across health, disability and aged care, building understanding and knowledge about the rights of South Australians, particularly older and more vulnerable members of our community, must be paramount. A number of resources available on the Office for Ageing Well website can support our communities to be part of the solution, including the Bystander Action for Ageing Well training module, providing the tools for in-house capability building, the Elder Abuse Prevention Communications Toolkit, providing information and guidance on how to communicate about the mistreatment and abuse of older people. And hopefully later this year, we will see some national alignment with the release of the National Plan to End the Abuse and Mistreatment of Older People. I thank ARIS and other organisations for their involvement in the development of the plan, and I look forward to its release and implementation. I trust today's 18th Annual World Elder Abuse Awareness Day online forum will bring forth ideas and collaborative efforts to champion the rights of older people and build a safer, more respectful aged care system. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And I've got to say that that Cook is a really passionate and dedicated minister and works very hard for her portfolios. I'd now like to introduce Chief Executive of ARIS, Carol-Ann Barkner, and when I go through her resume, it's hard to work out when she actually gets time to sleep. So Carol-Ann brings over 35 years of experience across health, aged care, legal, and not-for-profit sectors. She is a registered nurse, a lawyer, and experienced executive who has worked in both rural and metropolitan areas in South Australia and New South Wales, including with culturally and linguistic diverse communities. She also has lived experience as a military family member and a strong advocate for veterans. Carol-Ann has held many leadership and advisory roles, including chair of LDEC National Reference Group, co-chair of OPAN's Policy and Systematic Advocacy Advisory Groups, and a member of the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission Advisory Council. So please join me in welcoming Carol-Ann. She shares her insights with us today. Carol-Ann will present on Reflections and Impact, ARIS 2024-2025.
Thank you so much, Paul. My session today is to provide reflections on ARIS impact from the financial year 2024, as well as some areas from early information from financial year 2025, including the Australian Elder Abuse Conference held in July 24. We will also hear a story about Dorothy and finally some future thoughts. Next slide, please. So let's start on some reflections on the Elder Abuse Action and ARIS partnership to deliver the Turn Up the Volume 2024 Australian Elder Abuse Conference here in Adelaide at the Convention Centre from the 22nd to 24th of July 2024. Despite some challenges just before we started with the worldwide CrowdStrike IT outage that caused us some concerns, we managed to go ahead with the conference and it had limited impact on the conference. Bev and I, the CEO of Elder Abuse Action Australia, spent a bit of time in our pajamas on the Sunday before the conference commenced and just honestly crossed our fingers and was so pleased that most of the conference systems worked. I would like to acknowledge the South Australian Governor Francis Adamson and Mr. Rod Bunting as patrons of ARIS who hosted a welcome function. I also acknowledge former Age Discrimination Commissioner Dr. Kay Patterson and the current Age Discrimination Commissioner Robert Fitzgerald AM, Anne Burgess AM, ARIS Chair and Chair of the Council of Aged Care Elders, Bev Lang, Executive Officer of Elder Abuse Action Australia, the Program Content Committee, the EAAA and ARIS teams who worked very hard for this national event. These events take much time and planning. We certainly had over 400 attendees. We also had more people online. We also had community groups attending and students looking at the event. We've previously hosted a National Elder Abuse Conference at the same convention centre in 2013. I would like to acknowledge the sponsors of the event, which included the Australian Attorney General's Department and at the time the Australian Department of Health and Wellbeing. I also acknowledge Minister Nat Cook, who you've already heard from and who is an advocate for older people. And also, most importantly, another key sponsor was Office for the Ageing Well here in South Australia. And I would like to also thank them for their ongoing collaboration. Continuing ARIS's long-standing history of innovation and trialling new projects and approaches to supporting older people. This particular conference really focused on raising the voices of older people with an increase in lived experience sessions. That meant having more older people telling their stories from the stage. This can make you feel a bit uncomfortable, but we do need to feel uncomfortable to call out for change. However, overwhelmingly, the feedback from attendees surveys said that 96% were satisfied about the quality of the program and the speakers. We also asked the question, how important is it that the New Aged Care Act includes enhanced rights and strengthened complaints procedures, with a 97.2% said it was incredibly important. We also acknowledged our disappointment regarding the pushback of the New Aged Care Act to 1 November 2025. However, we also know that there is a need to have in place all of the information required for both providers and older people to make informed decisions regarding their care and fee. So let's have a look at ARIS's impact. Next slide, please. So during financial year 2024, ARIS engaged with just under 25,000 people, providing individual advocacy and information to 4,650 individuals. Additionally, ARIS provided 637 education sessions and 224 community engagement events with 16,000 attendees across South Australia on aged care rights, retirement village rights, elder abuse prevention strategies, and living a positive life. We've also been called upon to provide many submissions. We've had 10 law reform areas, including the Aged Care Act, financial enduring powers of attorney, and we're called to appear before the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Corporations and Financial Services. ARIS continues to raise at every opportunity the real issues relating to financial abuse and the continuing issue of lack of harmonisation of legislation between the jurisdictions, which is costly and continues to cause harm. As you can appreciate, we are still in the current financial year for 2025. However, we've already seen a 20% increase in advocacy support from around Q3, so a couple of months out from the end of the financial year, and being called upon to provide submissions to retirement village rules, state planning rules, the South Australian Law Reform Institute review of the Real Property Act, state mental health and disability action plans are some of the work. And you also heard Minister Cook talk about the ageing plans as well, safeguarding ageing well plans. We continue to work with OPAN on the New Aged Care Act and rules, and we anticipate that this pace for requests for ARIS submissions at both a state and national level will continue to increase. Next slide, please. Apologies, got a bit of a frog in my throat. So, continuing on with our stats, we had supported 90 people regarding financial advocacy. We did 586 home care check-in activities. We assisted 98 people just in the Salisbury and Elizabeth council areas to access My Aged Care services via Care Finder program. We attended 81 network events where we inform others about ARIS's services. We assisted 292 people with information advocacy about their retirement village rights, including assisting them at 6 SACAT matters. We also referred 358 callers with information on other services. We continue to refine our data to understand gaps in the system. We work closely with OPAN, refining that data, who provides a national aged care advocacy program presenting issue reports. So I've just given you a lot of data. So what do we know about the data at this stage? Next slide, please. So here are some headline themes from our data at a point in time being January 2025. So residential aged care, we're seeing fees and charges, communication, food, meals and nutrition and hydration issues. Home care, communication, finding, changing, engaging with service providers, fees and charges. Financial residential care, financial hardship, fees and charges, errors and overcharges. Financial home care, unspent funds, invoices, statements, incomes and means testing, fees and charges, errors and overcharges. Retirement villages, we've seen communication between residents and the village operator, contract issues, maintenance repairs, fees and charges. Most recently, we've started to see some emerging issues of concern regarding requiring family members to sign deeds of guarantee over their houses under pressure with statements such as, if you don't sign, you can't have a bed. We've also seen debt collecting proceedings being issued against older people related to their aged care. So let's now talk about Dorothy's story. Dorothy's situation came to the attention of Aris via the support of her neighbour contacting Aris with Dorothy present. Thanks, Sakina, for that slide change. Dorothy had initially moved into a residential aged care home to support her husband, Ken, who required full-time care. This arrangement had been encouraged by Dorothy's son and was made on the understanding that Dorothy could return to her home once Ken had passed. However, she soon discovered her son had transferred the family home into his family trust without her consent and had changed the locks on the house and mailbox, restricting her access. He was also using Ken's bank card. Things escalated when her son claimed to take control of her affairs under a power of attorney, insisting she could not leave the residential aged care home without his approval and often acting in an aggressive manner towards her. Dorothy retained full cognitive capacity and rightly felt that the power of attorney would only be activated if she became legally incapacitated. Both Dorothy and Ken had completed advanced care directives and powers of attorney, naming each other as attorney and substitute decision-making, with their son being specifically designated only in the case of their incapacity. So Aris supported Dorothy's rights and autonomy, promptly taking steps to safeguard her independence. The advocate involved a legal service to advise Dorothy on her ways to protect her assets. The advocate assisted Dorothy to obtain a cognitive assessment, which supported her belief that she retained ability to make her decisions. The advocate provided support facilitating consultation with the legal service to assert her rightful role as her husband's attorney and substitute decision maker, as well as demanding inspection of the trust. Further legal advice was provided regarding lodging a caveat on the title of her home and revoking her existing power of attorney. Dorothy also sent formal letters to the residential aged care home and to her family expressing her wish to restrict specific visitors. Dorothy was also supported to connect with her grandchildren, who were also provided support to re-establish control of her affairs. The outcome of this was, after Ken's passing, Dorothy, as executor and beneficiary of the estate, regained control of the assets, She was able to put an end to her son's attempt to manage her care, including with him trying to arrange ACAT assessments without her input, and she returned to her family home with her mail and belongings restored. She updated her power of attorney and advanced care directives documents, reassuring her that her future wishes would be respected. Advocacy in this case ensured that Dorothy's autonomy was respected, allowed her to make informed decisions about her life and care, and ultimately restored her peace of mind. Next slide, please. So what is on the horizon? Knowledge is power. We've got a new Aged Care Act. Once again, a little bit disappointed about the delay, about those reforms being pushed back to 1 July 2025, but we recognise that older people as participants required to be fully informed regarding requirements about their care plan, fees and charges before signing any agreements. However, we also say do not take your foot off the pedal, as older people need to receive additional supports under the new home support program, and we look forward to that full implementation on 1 November 2025. Supported decision making is front and centre of the new Act. That means that there is a fundamental shift in how we engage and support older people. You will hear more from our speakers today about that shift. Dorothy's story outlines the complex intersection of the financial abuse of an older person and how, without bystander support, in this instance from a neighbour, and access to advocacy support systems, including timely legal advice about their rights, could have led to Dorothy effectively being detained in a residential aged care home and the loss of her assets and autonomy. Losing your autonomy and the ability to make decisions about where you live, who you see, and what is done with your assets is a significant restriction, imposition on a person's human rights. Decisions made to limit or remove an individual's rights to exercise their autonomy should always have safeguards in place, such as independent advocacy and legal representation to ensure due process is followed. Restrictive practices continue without the fundamental recommendation by the Royal Commission into Aged Care Quality and Safety about having oversight by an authorising officer, and we are aware of the need for reform in this space. Retirement villages. Many people are happy with this option, but once again, people are demanding greater accountability and transparency, and we welcome the changes by the current government. But there are other models of seniors housing options that are developing, and how can we educate and build capacity of future and current residents' knowledge so that they are making informed decisions, including understanding future exit fees and charges. So what am I signing up for? A further word about human rights. Financial abuse of older people was a significant issue raised by ARIS external stakeholders surveys as a remaining issue. Ageing well means that we should be able to be in control for as long as possible, and the community is well aware that societal norms such as ageism is not acceptable and has to be called out. Accelerated or inheritance impatience is unacceptable. The issue of access to services continues, with older people awaiting access to home care packages, but also becoming stranded in hospitals with nowhere to go. More needs to be done, but knowledge is power. So inform yourself, and we're here to help you. Now more than ever in the current world climate, we should be turning our mind to human rights. Most of us would agree that human rights recognise the inherent value of each person, regardless of background, where we live, what we look like, what we think, or what we believe. They're based on principles of dignity, equality, and mutual respect, which are shared across cultures, religions, and philosophies. They're about being treated fairly, treating others fairly, and having the ability to make genuine choices in our daily lives. Respect for human rights is the cornerstone of strong communities in which everyone can make a contribution and feel included. Human rights are for all, including older people. However, now more than ever, there is a need for a Human Rights Act to ensure that our rights are protected and we have a shared understanding of those rights. I strongly encourage you to consider lending your voice to the call for Human Rights Act at both a state and national level. I encourage you all to wear purple on World Elder Abuse Awareness Day on the 15th of June. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Carol Ann, and thank you for your presentation, but also what you do for ARIS, people that we look after. And sadly, Dorothy's story is just one of many. I feel sometimes frustrated that we actually can't do more. I now want to introduce Interim First Nations Aged Care Commissioner, Andrea Kelly, to the virtual stage to begin her presentation. Andrea Kelly is a proud Warrumungu and Larrakia woman with over 33 years of dedicated service in the Australian Public Service. Her career has been distinguished by a commitment to advancing the rights of First Nations people through influential roles, including a position as Deputy Chief Executive of the Reconciliation Australia. Notably, she has played a pivotal role in establishing the Territory's Stolen Generations Redress Scheme, a landmark initiative addressing historical injustice faced by Indigenous communities. Currently serving as the Interim First Nations Aged Care Commissioner, Andrea leads an effort to advocate for culturally safe aged care services for First Nations communities across Australia. Andrea's extensive experience and deep cultural insights drive her ongoing work to influence public policy and achieve meaningful change for First Nations people. Andrea is going to speak today about transforming aged care for Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islander people. Thank you, Andrea.
Many thanks, Paul, and good morning, I think, to everyone. Perhaps good afternoon in some parts of people joining. I will start by acknowledging that I am on Aboriginal land. I'm on the land of the Ngunnawal people here in Canberra, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and I acknowledge my traditional country in the Northern Territory, Warrumungu. You were almost there, Paul. Warrumungu country, which is my grandmother's country, and Larrakia country, which is my grandfather's country. I acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people online today. Thank you for having me. As Paul said, I'm the Interim First Nations Aged Care Commissioner. I was appointed to this role in January last year. It was a recommendation from the Aged Care Royal Commission that the Royal Commission found that aged care in this country was culturally unsafe for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Among many recommendations, a recommendation to establish a First Nations Aged Care Commission and Commissioner. So I have been in this role for over just 18 months now, and I had a mandate, three key priorities for government. One was around the establishment of a commission and its powers and authority and what that would look like. The second one was to consult widely with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people around the barriers to accessing aged care. Now, we know Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people don't access aged care at the rates of the broader population. So understanding what those barriers to that was really important. And the third role really is around advocacy, and I'll touch a little bit on that perhaps later. So when I commenced I set out initially to undertake an extensive consultation process. I was on the road pretty much for 4 months. I think I had 1 week back in Canberra in that 4-month period. I met with over 1,000 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, as well as providers, mainstream and Indigenous providers, carers, family members, a whole host of people. But the priority was really meeting with older Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to talk to them about aged care. Many of you may know Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people can access aged care from the age of 50, and that. So when we're talking about a broader cohort. The other interesting element to that is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people statistically die at younger age than the broader population. However, we are starting to live longer. So that was a bit of the focus also around some of my findings. So I travelled across the country. I went to regional, remote, very remote urban settings, capital cities, and as I said, met with a broad range of people, and as a result of that, I provided a report to government that really talked to why Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people don't access aged care, and the challenges that they faced, the challenges with the system, but also the good things that are happening out there, because there are a lot of really innovative and beautiful things happening in the aged care sector to support Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Sadly, a lot of that is limited to the community controlled sector, and that's because they understand, they work in those communities, they understand those communities. But as I said, there are some beautiful things that are happening out there. So as a result, I've produced this book for government. I'm hoping you can see it. I'm not sure if the background stops that. It is available on the website. If you go into the department's website, that is available. So I won't talk into detail about that, but I made 4 recommendations to government. One was around the role of the commission and the role of the commissioner. The second recommendation was around a 10-year plan for transforming aged care for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. One was around how we align aged care to closing the gap, particularly around reforming government organisations. And the fourth one was around a whole host of recommendations that I had written to the minister, the former minister, last year about. So we have got a new minister, and I will be meeting with the minister in the coming weeks to talk about the report and the findings of the report. One of the other things that was really critical is we engage with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities a lot, and you heard Paul say how long I've been in government, so I have been guilty of this myself, but we engage with community a lot. Consultants engage with community a lot. But one thing we don't do, and we don't do well at all, is go back to community and let them know what we've done with their information. Because at the end of the day, it is their intellectual property. It's their information. We're gathering it for our purposes, for government purposes, for policy purposes. So this was really around, how do I get back out to all of those people I met with in community to let them know what I told government. So it was my very first consultation up in Broome, where I was having this, I was thinking about this and how important to community that was, that information sharing with them, but also for my integrity, for them to be able to trust me, for me to have ongoing relationships with elders with these communities. So again, that was equally important. So I came up with the idea of a pictorial book that would go back out to every single person I met with, go back out to communities. And it was just a short version of the report. Because the report is dense, it's written for government. And I knew that, a lot of people don't have time for that, but we also know a lot of our elders couldn't and probably wouldn't read it. So I'm really hoping you can see this one, which I am equally proud of. This is the pictorial booklet. I don't think you can see it. Also available online. And I do have some copies of this, which I'm more than happy to share with people online. But that really talks about, in essence, captures the report and talks about everything that people talked to me about, the barriers they were having, the challenges they were having. And a lot of it was how they can stay on country, how they can remain in community, and get the services that they need in community. And when we talk about the New Aged Care Act and the Statement of Rights and Individuals' Rights, how do we as society enable that to happen? Whether people are in remote or regional communities, how do we enable them to stay on country, in community, getting the services that they need? So that really is a challenge for government, for policymakers, and for the broader sector around how we do that. So the other key thing, and I probably don't want to talk too much about this because I do know we have a Q&A session coming up, but there are lots of things that came out in the report. And given that we're talking about, elder abuse and awareness about elder abuse, I think that a couple of high-level points that I'll raise now before we go into the Q&A a bit later is we know that in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander context, we do need to think about what elder abuse looks like in the cultural and historical context. Our health, and because of our health, we're more impacted, but which lends itself to our vulnerability and the abuse. And the fear of reporting. This was a topic that when I was consulting, unless it was raised with me, it was something that I didn't particularly raise because of the sensitivities. There are some cultural elements, and I'm certainly not hiding behind culture in terms of abuse, but we have to understand some of the cultural obligations around kinship and understanding that sort of relationship. Again, I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I guess the thing we need to understand in that context too is the fear of older people not wanting to report abuse in whatever form it takes, but particularly financial abuse, for the fear of their family member being removed or jailed. And that fear is real. We know that majority of stolen generation survivors now are over the age of 50. So they've lived through that fear of being removed. So they know what that, they know the implications, and they don't want that for their family members. So in this context, the cultural obligations and the cultural realities we do need to think about. We need to understand, we need to think about it. I think there's elements around, and I know Caroline mentioned them, but around information. A lot of people I met with don't actually have not the right information, but they just lack the information generally around, well, what is elder abuse? What does it what is it? Is it more than financial? Is it sexual? Is it just being, left alone and no food, not being cared for, not being bathed? So again, we really need to think about what, in that context, how do we explain to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people what abuse constitutes, I guess. The other thing I just want to touch on is the terminology around elder abuse. Again, in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander context, an elder is a designated, like it is a title. And elders are, they're not chosen. It's actually how you become an elder and how you are an elder in your community, in your family, in your context, cultural context. So the word use of elder abuse in an Aboriginal context can be confusing, because not all elders in an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander context and in the broader population are abused. We saw that even the minister talking about the horrific abuse that happened to that lady. So sometimes Aboriginal people think, well, our elders aren't being abused because they see the word elder. So again, terminology is really important when we're talking with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, because elders means something different. It just doesn't mean because I'm old, I'm an elder. Elder is a position, it's a cultural position. And not everyone's an elder, irrespective of their age. So I think we just need to think a little bit more about that. And there are quite a number of other cultural complications. And as I said, this is not hiding behind culture. This is about understanding culture and how we place that in this conversation. But Paul, I might leave it there, because some of the other things I do want to touch on, I think will probably come out in the Q&A, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea, and thank you so much for your presentation, and my apologies for my pronunciation. I've got a big gap in my cultural awareness. I grew up on Kangaroo Island, an island south of Adelaide, and was regarded for a very long time as a taboo land for Indigenous and Aboriginal people. So I've got a lot to learn, and I'm really pleased to hear your presentation. The consultation that you've done is extraordinary, and what a remarkable thing to actually get out for 4 months, get out of Canberra and go and talk to the people that you're going to be looking after. So well done to you, and well done for what you've done so far, and I'm sure you've still got a lot to do. So thank you very much for your presentation, and we'll get to some questions later on. So thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
Now it's time to hear from Daniela Greenwood, our final presenter for today. Daniela Greenwood is an international consultant, advisor, keynote speaker, and published author, specialising in human rights and citizenship policy and practice in aged care. She is regularly engaged in a range of expert advisory roles, including Older Persons Advocacy Network, most of us know as OPAD, Meaningful Ageing Australia, Australia Government Department of Health and Aged Care, and the Australian Recreational Therapy Association, where she is a board member. 2020, Daniela was invited to provide expert witness testimony to the Australian Royal Commission into Aged Care and Quality and Safety. And I've got to say, I went to some of those sessions because I was affected with my sister was in aged care, and that was a hard road to hoe. It was pretty tough. In her previous role as National Strategy Innovation Manager, Daniela was responsible for developing and implementing an award-winning relation approach nationally. Daniela will present on rights first every time. So thank you, Daniela.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to share my screen. checking that's available for everyone.
Yes, thanks, Danielle.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. You never know with technology. First of all, I'd like to thank Aris for the honour of contributing to this fantastic forum held to recognise World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, which is later this week. Aris do world-class work in this space, and they really set the space, the pace and the bar for the whole country, I believe. I've been excited about attending this and also sharing today. So today I'm going to talk through the key foundational underpinnings in this changing aged care landscape that Caroline mentioned earlier. And to do that, we really need to clarify what we're moving from and where we're moving to or hoping to move to. And we're moving from an institutional foundations in aged care to human rights. And then I'm going to focus on the motto that Aris frequently use, which is also included for this forum: see it, stop it, prevent it. There's no excuse for abuse. And this is my passion, the area of seeing it. And this is where all of our awarenesses in terms of elder abuse come into play, because we really have to see it in order to call it out. And then we can work together on stopping and preventing it. So today we'll look at how a human rights lens helps us to see what are, I think we'll all agree, sometimes really normalised and often almost invisible abuses that happen in aged care. And then finally, we'll have a really brief look at some of the main areas in aged care that we need to really practically look at through a human rights lens so we can ensure that human rights come first every time. But first of all, I'd really like to ground this in the real world of practice. And some of you may have seen some of these little videos before that we recorded with real staff, with real older people, based on real feedback from bottom up around what people were experiencing. Just so we can capture one of those really normalized everyday occurrences in residential aged care. And these types of moments are the ones that are almost invisible. But when we really think about, like, when you're watching this, listen to the conversation and what that has to say about the dignity and respect that's been afforded to the individuals that are being discussed. And it's when we really sit back and think about that we can begin to see how dignity and rights can be chipped away at so easily and so casually in the aged care space.
All right, I think that's about it for today. Now, just one more thing. Get all the residents out of their room for this activity happening in the ground floor this afternoon.
Few residents like John, they prefer staying in the room at this time. And then Nancy, she's watching her favorite show, Boulder the Beautiful. And she's gonna be really annoyed if I keep her asking to come outside.
No, I can't have them isolating themselves in the rooms. We've got a duty of care. Anyways, it's gonna be good for them.
All right.
And we hear words like them, and you can just imagine the humiliation really that woman would experience after she says, I'm just watching Bold and the Beautiful, and someone says, nope, you've got to come out for the afternoon activity for your own good. Just how psychologically and emotionally, and imagine that happening all the time and what that would do to your sense of self and to your psyche. I think that's a good example. Even though it's a small moment, it's a very telling moment, and it's what we're moving from. But those kind of practices, you go into any aged care home in Australia, you'll see them happening today. They're so deeply entrenched in these institutionalized and paternalistic foundations. That's what we're trying to move away from. And I actually think, as Caroline said earlier, that the sort of release of the Aged Care Act and the Statement of Rights that's part of the Act has been postponed till October. And I think that's a real giveaway that people are beginning to see the enormity of that foundational shift required. I think a few people were thinking we can just change a few words and a few policy documents and then it's all good. And I think they're beginning to see actually This is huge, and it's going to take a lot of thinking and a lot of work. So let's think about what we saw in that video, because these really are the legacies that we're inheriting, that we're trying to move away from. So the first one was paternalism, and that's just negating, overriding, or ignoring an individual's preference or decision based on what someone else thinks is in their best interest, even when there's absolutely no severe and immediate risk involved. So we saw a good example of that in the video. Someone said, oh, it'll be good for them. And paternalism is the antithesis of human rights. And I love this C.S. Lewis quote that really gets to how pernicious this is. It's just so deeply embedded in people's psyches that it's going to take a lot of work to make people aware of it. So of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. Those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience. They don't feel guilty about it. You could see that in that interaction, neither of those staff members felt they were doing the wrong thing or that something was wrong. And I think this term institutional structural violence is helpful in explaining and helping us understand the ways that things like paternalism can be so normalized in spaces like aged care that just lead to this business as usual discrimination and dehumanizing practices that really set the tone of the interaction that we just saw. And as I said, both of those people thought that was a normal conversation, but it really did constitute profound oppression and breaches of international human rights law. And then deep at these foundations, I think the Australian Law Reform Commission coined this phrase of institutional abuse in their final report on elder abuse. And institutional abuse is a form of abuse described as occurring when the routines, systems, regimes of an institution such as aged care result in poor or inadequate standards of care and poor practice, which affects the whole setting and denies, restricts, or curtails the dignity, and we saw that, privacy, choice, independence, or fulfillment of individuals. So this is why the changing aged care landscape requires this kind of fundamental reform at the foundational, philosophical, and operational levels. And we're moving from that to a human rights-based approach. We're moving to human rights. And as Caroline said, human rights, I mean, it sounds obvious, but they're for all people. They're not an add-on, they're not an opinion, they're not yet another model of care. And we've all been inundated with those. I know I've spent a large portion of my career developing and implementing different models of care, from person-centered, relationship-centered, consumer-directed, both for residential care and home care internationally. And after witnessing the outcome of those efforts, I turned to human rights as a practice model, as a means of kind of trying to break through that brick wall that all of those approaches stopped at. None of them were capable of stopping what we just witnessed in that first video. They could not secure human rights on an equal basis for older people. And a human rights lens really does serve to help expose those everyday normalized breaches for what they are. And the good thing about human rights is they sit above everything. They sit above organizational values, whatever model of care someone has, their staffing model, their physical build and design. Human rights sits above all of those things. And human rights has codified authority above the medical professions, and of course, above staff and family paternalism. And human rights include all of the really important freedom from that overt abuse, but also it ensures the right to self-determination, including having appropriate accommodations and supports that someone requires in order to exercise their self-determination. And I would say since the Royal Commission, I think Australia has been slowly sort of moving toward a human rights approach. And so far, the focus has rightly been on reducing overt abuse and neglect through increased reporting obligations and tighter controls over restrictive practices, which is great. But as soon as something like self-determination gets brought into the picture, older people continue to be treated as if they have different or lesser rights. Just thinking of that movie again. We hear things like, well, human rights are important for older people, but, and that but invariably refers to sort of having equality in decision making and just basic freedoms and privacy in everyday life. And that's discrimination. Older people do not have different or lesser rights. And so this is really important for this group, a really important area of focus for us now in terms of elder abuse prevention, because as soon as it's okay for one group of individuals to be treated as though they've got different or lesser rights, we've already begun down that track of dehumanizing attitudes and practices. So in briefly outlining that human rights, what we're shifting to, I'm just going to refer to one of the conventions that's underpinning the New Aged Care Act and the Statement of Rights, which is full and front and centre in the Act, and that's the Convention on the Right of Persons with Disabilities. This really was the foundation for the new Act, or the CRPD. And it makes sense that the CRPD is at the foundation of the New Aged Care Act, because we're talking about people who are receiving aged care services where we find a range of disabilities, either lifelong disabilities or newly acquired disabilities, age-related disabilities, particularly cognitive disabilities, including dementia. And I guess that it's important to note that the OECD estimates that around 70% of people living in aged care institutions have some kind of cognitive disability. So we have to be all focused on making sure that we develop approaches and oversight that doesn't let that 70% fall through the cracks of human rights protections and oversight in aged care. And it's also important to note that the World Health Organization has urged different countries to align their domestic policies and dementia strategies with the CRPD. And the CRPD was developed with disability activists when it became clear that some people were not enjoying their human rights in the same way as other people. There's no new rights than there are in any of the other conventions. It just outlines steps that have to be taken so that everyone enjoys their human rights. So in it, I've just picked out some brief things, but we see the obvious things like respect for inherent dignity, individual autonomy, freedom to make choices, independence of persons. We have a fantastic definition of discrimination, which says that it's any distinction, exclusion, or restriction on the basis of disability, which has the purpose or effect. So it doesn't need to be intentional. It just has the effect of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise on an equal basis with others of all human rights and fundamental freedoms in any kind of setting, including in that documentation room and in that residence room where she's just about to be wheeled out of there against her will. The convention, the CRPD, includes that the government have an obligation to make sure that discrimination is eradicated by individuals and businesses, including aged care providers. And the CRPD has Article 12, which just reaffirms that persons with disabilities, including cognitive disabilities, have the right to make their own decisions and to be provided with decision-making support, giving effect to their current will and preferences. And that's where all the energy needs to go, not on determining what people think is in their best interest, but on finding out what their current will and preference is. And Article 12 also includes, importantly, having control over your own financial resources. And if we get to the statement of rights, you can see immediately how this has been informed by the CRPD. So this is Australia's statement of rights that's inside the new Aged Care Act. Immediately you see things like choice, decision making. It gets a bit more down in the weeds and says that individuals can determine how, when and by whom their aged care services are delivered. And of course, control over financial affairs and personal possessions, and support if necessary, including a whole range of supports that you need to make a decision and carry out that decision. And of course, we've got dignity and respect and non-discrimination in the Statement of Rights. And you can see how this is really built on our international human rights obligations. Of course, free from all of those horrible violence, degrading, inhumane exploitation, coercion, and a right to have your aged care services delivered in an accessible manner that works for you, that has disability-related accommodations in place. And importantly, that you get all the information you're given and that you give people is in a manner that you understand, whether it's your language, the size font you need, the type of format it's delivered in, that we make sure that everyone is, it's not just a one size fits all in terms of how information is shared. And just briefly, the quality standards really back that up as well. These are the new standards. They talk about discrimination, of course, abuse, neglect, dignity, respect, personal privacy, and a choice about when people receive personal care and who by. And importantly, the actual act, the aged care standards say that the provider has to demonstrate that they understand that statement of rights and that they've thought ahead and put in place practices and a whole range of measures to make sure that they've adhered to the statement of rights. So once again, I'd like to show a really short example of an everyday practice in aged care, and then use just even the statement of rights, a few key points from the statement of rights as a lens to look through when we think about this interaction.
So I just wanted to talk about Mum. She seems to be putting on a lot of weight lately. I really want to cut out the desserts.
Look, I get it. We've been trying to cut down on her food intake.
Yeah, because she sits around, she's not active, and I really just think the desserts need to stop.
Well, she's sneaky. She'll just take some extra desserts and put down in her top drawer.
She really is.
You know what? I'll put down in my progress notes that you requested not to give her any more desserts.
That's really appreciated. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care.
See ya.
So unfortunately, interactions like that are really common in aged care. And even a cursory glance at the statement of rights, I mean, there was no dignity in that interaction, the whole tone of that interaction. There was relationality, but it was a coercive relationality. The word sneaky was used. Adult status was not afforded. And neither of those two people felt like they were doing the wrong thing. That's how pervasive this institutional foundation is. And you can see those two people are chatting and feeling really okay about casually overriding the choices of another adult citizen when there was no serious or imminent risk to the safety of that citizen or anybody else. Quite honestly, if you stand back and think about that interaction, it's pretty ludicrous. I mean, it was about dessert. In any other health or social or context, that kind of behavior would just be called weird. And maybe that is where we need to get to with things. I mean, we just need to find a place. I think human rights give us a shared, firm foundation to be able to look at one another when we witness something like that and say, you're kidding, right? You're kidding. Like, really? That happens? I think that's where we need to get to. You can see how that kind of normalized interaction just chips away at dignity. Imagine that older woman having her dessert snatched away. anyone else in the community, any of us, anybody would expect to be able to make those kind of choices to have dessert or not have dessert without having to get approval or medical sanction. And that means that what we just witnessed, of course, is discrimination. We need to really be able to call that weird and to point out that it's weird. And when we see it, absolutely all of us have a responsibility to react in some way. So, and we've got a common language to do it now, and a statement of rights. I think I'm feeling more hopeful that we can begin to chip away at this. And I've got one more video to show one of the more common things that happens. It would have happened across Australia this very morning.
Good morning. It's time to get up. Come on, let's go. It's already 9 in the morning and you've already missed the breakfast. The other way. All right. You already missed the breakfast. Come on, let's go. Let's go. Come on. Let's go. Here. Hold on here.
And that's happening every morning. Thank goodness that that is covered explicitly in both the Statement of Rights and the new standards in relation to people being able to choose when and by whom any kind of personal care happens. But again, if you step back from this, we're kind of seeing a double whammy here. We're seeing maybe a bit of paternalism in that maybe a family member requested mum's up first thing, but it's probably more likely that we're seeing the double whammy of paternalism and money. It's probably operational efficiencies that are driving that carer to wake that person up like that. And that's because breakfast in many places is open for a very short period of time, or an assessment is done at the very beginning when everyone's really stressed. Maybe even the daughter does it or something and says, yeah, mum's up at 7. Yep. You know, she won't be up for breakfast at 8. Yep. And then it's kind of painted as like it was that woman's decision that she wanted to get up at 7 because it's ticked on a tick box in a care plan, as opposed to it being her decision every day. So we need to be a bit vigilant about that. But I would just ask you to imagine what would happen if that woman pushed the carer away. The carer would have to report that, and now that individual would be labelled physically aggressive, resistive to care, and any other number of things that could then lead to her being drugged. If someone is drugged because they resist being treated this way, resist being manhandled to get out of bed, resist being rushed, resist being told to get up and at these set institutional times, because for the sake of financial efficiencies, breakfast is only available for that short window of time, and the carer gets there at 7 and she has to get 6 or 7, sometimes 8 people up by 8:30 at the latest. Breakfast is usually a lot earlier than that. That's physically impossible without treating people like that and worse. So we have to call just that normalised practice that mornings in aged care are a nightmare. It's a ludicrous way to set up your morning, to have morning staff arrive at 7 and then breakfast available for that short amount of time. I think it's weird that aged care have let that go on for so long. And of course, the way that woman was treated was just really, really appalling. So I've got a final kind of thing to share with you here. And that's, we're looking at the Statement of Rights. We didn't really even need to. There was no choice, no decision making. She didn't get to decide how, when, or by whom. And there was no dignity and respect. I think that's not an incredibly difficult one to work our way through. But I'd like to go through this one that I'll read out, and you can read along if you feel like it. So, a resident with Parkinson's disease and moderate cognitive impairment could be found each day extremely distressed and smashing on the front door of the aged care home to get out. All he wanted was to go to his local yacht club for a few hours, as he had done his entire working life. It was assessed that it was not safe for him to go on his own. External behaviour experts made some recommendations for a behaviour support plan that included offering the man a drink or distracting him with personalised music or a walk around the home. PRN psychotropic medication was also approved. Family rejected the manager's suggestion that the man's own financial resources be used to hire someone to assist him to the club for a few days a week. 2 weeks later, the man lost balance while trying to open the front door, and he ended up in hospital with a broken hip. He died a few weeks later. Now, moving on to look at that through the statement of rights, that man involved had made a decision, and he made his decision really clear to everyone. He wanted to go to the club. Whether he expressed that completely verbally, non-verbally, or a combination of both, everyone seemed to know what his preference was. It's just that he would require access to his own finances in order to make that happen, because the aged care home said they weren't funded to have a carer go with him to his club. So I know this is messy and complex, but if we stand back and really think about it, if someone is drugged because they're distressed or agitated about having their human rights, this right to self-determination, autonomy violated, and all the while having access to their own financial resources would have meant that that right was not violated, then we do have to call that out for exactly what it is. The person is being drugged for financial reasons, however you want to cut that up or shape that up. Now, obviously, in that situation, it wasn't a clinician or a behaviour expert that was needed in that situation. Through the lens of human rights and now the statement of rights, we can see it was actually experts in financial elder abuse and probably even human rights law that were required. And that's the difference a human rights-based lens makes. All of the ticks and balances were done for that man. Behaviour support had family approval, PRN psychotropic. All of the ticks and boxes had been, everything had been covered off so that it looked like people had done their job. But no one thought, well, why can't the man just pay for a carer to take him there? Why can't he be supported to do that? And I don't even like saying that, because of course I'm aware that not all residents will be able to afford that. But of course, that's the next step we need to get to. In all situations of distress, if someone is drugged because they're distressed or agitated, and it is very likely that that distress could be alleviated by providing one-on-one support to soothe them, to help calm them, to engage the person. If we know that that would alleviate the distress, then we have to call that drugging out for exactly what it is. If that one-on-one support isn't provided and we know that it would work, that person is being drugged for financial reasons. Now, I'm not sure where we go with that, but I do know that the first step is in seeing it, in calling it what it is, because it really is only then that we can begin to have some honest conversations and even begin on that pathway to our goal of stopping and preventing elder abuse. And I think that's why the see it is so important. And of course, once you start to see things differently like that, it's difficult to unsee them. And that's where we all need to get to. And that's why it's going to take all of us feeding back about some of these ongoing lack of recognition of older people as equal citizens with equal rights. And it's that type of thinking and that type of lens we need to put on to every situation in the provision of aged care services, whether home care or residential aged care. Just now we've applied a human rights lens to just a few really everyday aged care moments, but this is something we can all do when we witness these things. And for this session, I've just made up a quick list. This isn't to read out or anything. I've just made up a quick list of some of the main areas in aged care that we need to look at through a human rights lens so that we can ensure that human rights come first every time. So I really have done this just so you can get a brief glance at some of the key moments in aged care service provision. So if we look at that, we're really looking at whether it's residential aged care in that column, home care in that column. Some of the key moments are what happens before you move in or before you start reaching out for services at home or in a residential aged care. Those first meetings to discuss support or when someone first moved in, so admission procedures, interim care plans, general life as a service recipient in the community or in residential aged care. So the provision of personal care, clinical care, meals, routines, access to the community, relationships, how complaints are taken, social and spiritual support when you're moving out or transitioning from home to residential aged care or dying. The social and spiritual support, looking at what is available through the lens of human rights in relation to that. So even if we just look at the first one there, what happens before someone moves into residential aged care or before they start receiving services, we're looking at things like advertising, people are given brochures, they're given a whole heap of information. There's usually phone calls. Maybe there's discharge planning if it's hospital involved. There's a tour, there's meetings, there's dealings with family, contracts, communication needs. What if we just really quickly and simply look at that through the statement of rights? So just a quick reminder at the top of this slide is a real summary of that statement of rights. An individual has a right to make decisions and have those decisions respected. They need to have a right to be provided with what they need in order to make decisions, including support, maybe a person, maybe not, any disability related accommodations. So that's thinking eyesight, mobility, hearing, fluctuating decision-making ability. That's around accommodations and accessibility, that you have to be provided with any information in a way you understand. So that includes having an interpreter or resources provided to you in your language. And it includes using your preferred form of communication. So if we think back to the man who was smashing on that door to get out, he had communicated his preferences in the only way he knew how. And people knew he wanted to go to the club. And that, the Statement of Rights and Human Rights says, we need to absolutely value those forms of communication in the same way we would verbal communication. And of course, that overarching dignity, respect, and non-discrimination. So let's look at that key summary in relation to those early days, which is that initial period before moving into residential aged care or reaching out for services. So if we look at advertising, if you look at the advertising, is it focused on the individual themselves, or is it pitched to someone else, such as a family member? What is the tone of that advertising? I've seen a lot of stuff around saying, oh, you'll feel a real sense of relief if you use our service. And they're actually talking to the children of the older person who's paying for these services. If you look at when people give you information about services, brochures, information, contracts, financial meetings, is it provided in a format that the individual themselves can access and understand, or is it only online? Is it only in small font? Is there no independent interpreter provided? Is there no use of easy read or the use of pictures and photographs? I just highlight, everybody knows this, 70% of residential aged care clients have some kind of cognitive disability. Now, I think it would be pretty weird if this wasn't catered for carefully with disability-related specific supports made available by the business providing those services. When 70% of aged care clients have some kind of cognitive disability, of course you will have taken that into account, one would hope. When we look at those first meetings, are they held at a time of day when the individual has the most energy and is most likely able to make decisions? Are they offered in the person's home or in hospital? And what does happen if the situation where the person actually is in hospital and needs to move to aged care for respite or residential aged care? Approximately 1/3 of admissions into residential aged care come directly from hospital. So again, it would be really weird if aged care providers had not developed systems, processes, and approaches to ensure that 1/3 of their clients were well catered for in terms of maximising their involvement, their decision-making, and their engagement in their own future and care. It would be a weird thing that aged care have gotten away with it for that long. And this is just one example, looking at one segment moving in, but looking through that lens, we can use that together as a group, as individuals and as activists, to try and tease out some of the things that are happening that are just weird and shouldn't be happening. These things set the tone and set the pathway for abuse. And I think especially that first phone call, if someone calls up an aged care place who isn't the individual who wants the services and says, oh, I'm looking for care for mum, and the person says, oh, let's just, and just goes ahead with it without saying, well, how can I get in what's your mum's name? How can I get information to your mum? Does she have the internet? Does she want me to send her a mail? I can go visit her in hospital. If that isn't happening from that very first phone call with a provider, then it isn't going to happen. That very first phone call sets the tone, and it totally centers who's going to be in power. So if there's any researchers listening, what a fantastic area of research, that first interaction. How can we maximize, use the statement of rights, use our international human rights obligations that Australia signed on to? How can we use it for that first point of contact with the aged care system? Because if we don't get that right, we're not going to get it right. So finally,
Sorry, Daniela, I'm just going to jump in. Your
yeah.
slides are getting cut off from the left.
Oh, we're getting cut off?
Yeah. If you just want to move them to, yeah, that's good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so human rights-based approaches. This is my final slide. I hope you've been able to see so far. This is what the Australian Human Rights Commission says human rights-based approaches are. It describes them as turning human rights from purely legal instruments, such as the new act, such as the statement of rights, into effective policies, practices, and practical realities. And this is where it really is all of our responsibility to see, and then to call things out for what they are when we see them, and really to call things weird if they're weird, and definitely to call out discrimination. A human rights lens, as I said earlier, does give us all this common language, this common set of expectations, and to many, many of us, a sense of a relief that our gut instincts on this were right, that we're not alone. And this kind of joins us together in our shared commitment to see, stop, and prevent elder abuse. So that's my presentation. I hope you did get to see my slides. If not, I'm really happy to share them, of course, with everyone afterwards. So thank you so much for your time today, listening to my presentation.
Thanks, Daniela, and what a wonderful and passionate presentation in support of aged care, and thank you for the work that you've done and you continue to do. It's sad in a way that we have to identify older people specifically for aged for human rights.
We'll get half an hour.
And as I said, I love your passion and support for the industry. We are a little bit ahead of time, and thank you, Andrea. We'll have time for questions, but I just wanted to relate a story from my own personal experience on the back of what Daniela has talked about. Post Oakden, and many of you would be aware of the closure of Oakden because of the abuse that went on there. My sister was a resident there when that was closed. So fortunately for me, I was asked to become involved post Oakden. Part of the role I had as a lived experience representative was to help redesign the neurobehavioural unit at the repatriation hospital in Adelaide. And so we went through that process, and when it was open, I was asked to speak, and then I was asked to take the Premier through that facility. And it was just mind-blowing for me in terms of what could be achieved if you really applied yourself. And so we went in. One of the things that we did is that we removed all of the nurse stations. And so there was a mobile nurse station. And I saw people sitting in there, the residents, the carers, the staff, all sitting there with smiles on their faces. And it was incredible. And there was a man there with headphones on. And I asked why you had headphones on. And we're talking about 2, 6, 7 people that are prone to violence in those facilities. He was non-verbal. This is a man that took 5 people to shower him under normal circumstances because of his violence. Essentially because he was frustrated with where he was and what was going on inside his own head. They discovered that he liked music. And so 24/7 had headphones on and was listening to music and was passive. And he's to see his wife, partner, sitting there holding his hand and him smiling was just an enormous breakthrough for me, and just still quite emotional to me. And it just goes to show what we can actually achieve, given the resources and the time, the desire to do that. So thank you for your presentation. I noticed on the questions, some people had their blood pressure raised, I think. You're pointing out what goes on, but a really worthwhile presentation, so thank you for that. I'm going to go to some questions now, and the first one for you is, for you, Andrea, in your view, how can government engagement processes be improved to ensure that First Nations voices are heard and responded to, particularly in aged care policy development and reform?
Thank you, host. It wasn't allowing me to unmute. That's a really great question, Paul, and I think I was really fortunate, but again, and there's absolutely lots of lessons. You know, it wasn't perfect for me either, but I think there's lots of lessons learned in the way that I did my consultations and engagement with community. I think the really good key thing in that question is the responding to, and I think that's probably right for anyone. I know a lot of people online, people who have contributed to, you know, the reforms, the New Age Care Act, the rules. I think at the end of the day, it really is that making sure that we get back to people that we've engaged with, consulted with, and even if it is something that we as governments or, you know, policy makers decide, you know, we may brief. We know that ministers at the end of the day will make the decisions. But I think there's still this void where we don't go back to people, communities, organisations and say that won't be prosecuted, or that's, you know, so I think, and I know that's the crux of the question is how do we do that better? I think it's just a fundamental element of as public servants that we need to do better at that, and explain to people why because a lot of people don't actually understand government processes and how from policy development, how it becomes legislation, or those sorts of things. So a lot of people don't understand that. So even having those conversations, but I think just general courtesy. As I said, I was very fortunate in the ability to do what I was able to do. But again, that was because I've been on both sides, having been consulted a lot, but also doing the consulting. So I wanted to make sure that everyone I met with had that opportunity to have to see that their voices. And so I want to make that point really clear about their voices, because even the report, that report was written from on the basis of what everyone told me. None of that is Andrea Kelly's view of the aged care system and what it should look like for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It is what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people said to me over that period. So again, that in itself is really important.
Thanks, Sandra. Next question is to Daniela. How should we respond to situations where someone with dementia appears to be experiencing emotional or verbal mistreatment from their partner or carer, but still has enough awareness to recognise and articulate the mainstream? What does human rights-based approach like in these complex regional relational dynamics?
And they are complex relational dynamics, aren't they? I've seen many of ARIS presentations and other researchers report through ARIS around long-term outcomes of reporting abuse, and and then some people saying, well, I wish I'd kept the relationship. But when you're asking the human rights, I think we would respond in the same way we would respond to anybody that we witnessed, knew, or came into contact with who was experiencing any kind of verbal or emotional abuse by someone close to them, sensitively and respectfully. We all understand that complexity. With a human rights lens, I think the focus would be on centering on the person. I think events like this are even helpful. I think the more information that gets out there, the more, the less the potential abuser can hide with these things being normalized. And I think that's part of all of our role, to sort of really show, using that human rights language, what abuse looks like, what's okay and what isn't. I come across so many children, sort of especially around financial abuse, not knowing that they're not knowing that they're involved in financial abuse. It was just a bit of this or a bit of that. I think the more we get information out that this is non-negotiable and it's not okay, that will be that will be a help. But ultimately, that person we need to do what it takes to keep them safe, and to offer them as much information as possible, options and support, if they do choose to do something about it.
Yeah, once again, you're going back to patient-centred care, actually, patient first, person first, and making sure their rights are heard. Thanks, Daniela. Carol Ann, in a situation where an enduring power of attorney is in place, how much responsibilities does the donee have to consider the wishes and preferences of the donor, particularly if the donor has been diagnosed with dementia but is still capable of living independently in their own home?
Thanks for that question. So just for clarification, the donee is in receipt of the power that's been given, and so they're acting on behalf of the donor. So just even the language there demonstrates the need to actually change legislation across the country. Enduring powers of attorney documents are state-based, and there is some tension. So in South Australia, we have an advanced care directive that is very much the legislation is considered a substitute decision-making jurisdiction, but it is based on the wishes and preferences. So there is a bit of tension between supported and substitute decision-making, but the enduring power of attorney is based on best interests. So the attorney in this state knows ARIS's position. We're looking for a new bill. We've seen draft legislation on and off over the last couple of years. So in that space, what are we meant to be doing as an attorney? We should be always listening to what the older person wants. We're talking about a person who is living at home. So we would be wanting to actively support them. But there's also a range of obligations on any attorney. And I think Daniela said it politely a little while ago about being really aware of your fundamental obligations. So understanding the person, hopefully that document's got plenty of conditions and information to guide the attorney, but also making sure that fundamentally understanding this is not your money. This is not your money. You need to be accountable for how this money is spent. You need to understand that you should be acting in certain ways. The approach should be a wishes and preferences approach. So quite often, ARIS over the many years have had people ring us and say, look, you know, the attorney won't even pay for slippers. You know, so fundamentally we need to listen to what is required to support the older person to live a good life. There will always be tensions, but once again, you know, how do we help someone to live their best life in the circumstances that we're currently experiencing? So if an older person wants to spend money, as Daniela said, because they want to go out to the club, and so be it. I know that's an easy answer. I understand there are complexities here. So there is fundamentally a push to go towards supported decision-making, but understanding when you're helping people to do that, and there are many people helping older people to do that, but it is a big responsibility. What I would say is that it is a big responsibility. So I do think there is a real need for greater education and acknowledgement that if someone is taking on this role, and it is not a paid role generally, and it takes a lot of time, that there needs to be some further education to understand this fundamental human rights shift.
Thanks, Carol Ann, and we're very lucky to have Carol Ann in her role at ARIS. Not only does she have a legal background, but she's got a medical background and nursing background as well, and has older parents. So she's across it all. Back to you, Andrea. What are some of the common issues older Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples face, particularly in remote communities? And how can we respectfully raise awareness about elder abuse in a culturally safe and meaningful way?
Yeah, so I'll answer the last part first. As I mentioned, that was a really sensitive and tricky element when I was consulting. You know, and I kind of outlined some of the reasons why. So I think it's still something I do think about and even challenge myself around how we do it respectfully and sensitively, because differentiating between supporting the elder and abusing the elder, and again, just just looking at the financial element, and what's acceptable and not acceptable, I think we need to have more conversations about. And there are, and I know Bridie Murphy, who works for ARIS, did a session around humbugging. I'm going to say earlier this year, but I could be incorrect on the timeline. But I know that is available on YouTube. So I do encourage people, if they haven't seen it, to look at it, because it talks about humbugging and what humbugging is and how Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people talk about humbugging. So again, it is something we do need to turn our mind to. We absolutely need to have those conversations with communities. But it's not only limited to remote communities either. You know, when we talk about abuse, a lot of conversations I had in regional and particularly capital cities, the isolation of older Aboriginal people, and again, I'm sure this is true for the broader population, that isolation, and particularly post-COVID, where people in a remote community, a regional community, you really have your family and support settings around you, so people know what's going on with the older person. When you're in say Melbourne, you can be quite isolated, where you don't have family come and visit you, or family live on the other side of the city, and those kind of things. So your vulnerability actually increases. So we need to be keeping an eye out for the vulnerability of those older Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as well, not just, when we talk regional and remote. When we talk about common issues, access, and again, my report talks about this, a lot of issues experienced by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, I think if they were resolved, would assist the broader population. We talk about access to aged care. We know in remote and regional communities, there's services. People might get a package, but there might not be services available. So again, how do we support people to stay at home longer, and stay on country longer? And I know someone put in the chat around, this is not just limited to residential aged care abuse. It's even at home. And I absolutely agree with the person who posted it. Sorry, they were anonymous, so I can't. And I talk about that in the report, that we, aged care is not just residential. When I was growing up, absolutely it was. We didn't have things like home support. Where I grew up in Alice Springs, we had 2 residential aged care services, and that's where the old people went, and they never came out. So there's still this fear of going into aged care as well. So now aged care is much more different. We have support at home, or community support, we have residential, we have options for aged care. So I think, again, the language around aged care and how we talk about aged care needs, again, we need to think about that a little bit more. So language and terminology, not so much language, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander language, but the complexity of the system. And again, I don't have to tell anyone on this call today about how complex the system is. The new Aged Care Act hopefully will fix some of those things. But again, when you're looking at a lot of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, English might be a second, third language for them. We know that for a lot of Indigenous communities, English, their language is not a written language, it's oral. So again, we're just continuously making Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people fit into a system that doesn't work for them. And there's some of the things that, that we really need to think about and consider.
Thanks so much, Andrea. Leads into an interesting question for Daniela. Do you believe it should be mandatory for all aged care workers to speak English clearly, particularly when supporting people with dementia who rely heavily on tone, expression and clear communication. And how do we balance communication needs with cultural diversity and workforce realities?
Gee, all of these questions today aren't difficult, are they? Or complex? I'm so glad they're so easy. When you said that, I worked as a carer in a dementia-specific area in an aged care home, personal carer when I first started out. And back then there was definitely the push that that was the place you put people with the least English language speaking skills because it didn't matter anyway. And that's not an exaggeration. So, of course, that's absolutely abhorrent. My approach would be to do it exactly the opposite way, and to have people with the best English language speaking skills working with people who have dementia. But similarly, it's just as I work with a lot of people who are speaking a different language with dementia. It's just as important that that every effort is made to match them with people who speak their language. I think that's just as important. I think consistency is really important because even when people are using words that don't make sense at all anymore, that consistency in relationship, you can usually get to understand what each other is saying or want and don't want. But as many staff as you have with the strongest English language speaking skills should be working in that space.
Thanks, Daniela. Yeah, difficult question to answer, but you've done it very well. Thank you. Probably our last question is going to Carol Ann. What checks and balances exist to ensure that spouses or life partners are not left financially vulnerable when an older person enters residential aged care? Are there systematic protections in place to prevent this kind of distress?
Ditto to Daniela, complex question that probably takes a bit of time. There are checks and balances in the system, but what I will say is I think in particular, this question is focused on entry to residential aged care. This will be a really complicated time for people. I would be suggesting that you seek as much guidance as possible. You should consider whether you reach out to Services Australia and ask for a one-on-one meeting with their financial information service. Their service focuses on age pension, Commonwealth health cards, pensioner cards, home equity schemes, and it does have a focus on aged care and retirement living. There has been growth of private aged care financial advising services. And what I would say it is really critical that you engage with either Services Australia or think about if you have the capacity to pay for an independent financial advisor regarding your aged care fees and charges. Please also ask any financial aged care advisor whether they're independent of operators. That's really important to understand. There are checks and balances in the system, and they will depend on your own particular system. Predominantly, in this case, where we have one person in a couple entering aged care, the home will remain mostly protected. But there are a range of circumstances and differences that need to be explored. One thing recently I came across, which surprised me and I was unaware of, was if you are separated, so one person living in their own home and the other person living in residential aged care, that there can be an increase in the pension. I think these are things that as an advocacy service and all of us should be able to make older people aware of and to consider. Going back to some of the comments around discharge planning, so how is discharge planning linking to services? We need to consider discharge planning can be different between private hospitals and public hospitals as well. So there are some systemic protections in place, but sometimes it really relies on you knowing what to do. And we need to do better at that as a society, to tell people how to best make big decisions. And they are big decisions. And they can, if the wrong decision is made, it may impact your ability to have choices in the future.
Thanks, Carol Ann, and unfortunately we're just about out of time. There's plenty of questions still to go, but I want to thank everybody that's joined in today. And a big thank you to the panelists. I've certainly learned a lot. Carol Ann, I obviously speak to a lot, but it's nice to meet you online, Daniela and Andrea, and hear your views of the sector and listen to what you're doing. And thank you for that. Sincerely, thank you for what you're doing, and let's hope you keep doing it for a long time. Yeah. There's going to be a poll put up on your screen. We would appreciate your feedback. That poll's there now. Also, please keep an eye out for a short feedback survey. And we've also got some exciting news from ARIS. We are now inviting organisations and individuals to become members of ARIS. So if you have a passion for rights of older people, I would encourage you to go to the ARIS website to learn more about that register. If you have any further questions or would like more information about ARIS, please don't hesitate to reach out to us on 08 8232 5377. Thank you so much for being online today. Thank you very much to our panel for committing their time. And certainly, as I said, I've learned a lot. And take care, and please share this with as many people as you can. So take care, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.